Hi, I'm Jack Messer, the Director of Planning for the City of Overland Park. You are tuning in to a video series that has been prepared in advance of the city's upcoming comprehensive planning process in 2022. This is one of 4 videos that is being presented from July through October. The idea of these videos is to introduce food for thought as we think about the future of Overland Park. We hope you find this information useful. The city is engaged with speakers on this topic to present trends and thinking about how cities, and particularly a suburban city like Overland Park, can think ahead to its future. We hope you find this information thought-provoking. We wanted to help motivate you to participate in the planning of your city, this city's future. We have also offered an opportunity for you to react to these thoughts and hope you will provide feedback in the online survey offered at the end of the video. This is our second video and is titled The Economics of Land Use, presented by AJ Fawver. AJ is the Community Consulting Planning Leader for Verdunity, a planning firm based in Lubbock, Texas. Her prior experience includes 15 years of municipal experience in key planning and development leadership roles for the cities of Lubbock, Amarillo, and San Angelo. She is accredited through the American Institute of Certified Planners, the Congress of New Urbanism, and as a certified public manager. Her blogging includes the past series, Planning and Shaping Cities, and her current series, Future-Proofing Cities. So watch AJ's video, and afterward, please take time to give us feedback on what you learned.
Hi, my name is AJ Fawver, and I am the Community Consulting Program Leader for Verdunity, a coaching and consulting team that helps city leaders align policy and investments with what residents are willing and able to pay for. I'm here to talk with you today about the economics of land use and how a focus on these economics as part of a comprehensive planning strategy can help make your community one that is fiscally sustainable and that meets the needs of its residents. The plight of communities these days is simple. They're all engaged in a race to become the next best place to live, work, and play. Publications such as U.S. News and World Report, which you can see here, and a variety of different types of websites are consistently churning out announcements about where they have determined is the next best place. Unfortunately, after World War II, cities have aggressively pursued fast growth and a higher quality of life in the short term without fully considering the long-term fiscal impacts for themselves and their residents. These long-term impacts include one very important question. What about maintenance after growth? That is to say, the maintenance of that infrastructure. After all, these physical improvements are not everlasting. Residents often assume that their tax dollars supply sufficient resources for maintaining infrastructure throughout their functional lives. However, that simply is not the case. The dollars collected in a city are but a fraction of the resources necessary for current operations and some select projects. So here's how that generally works. The land developer, think residential subdivisions and office parks, for example, build the infrastructure. And to be clear, that is the physical system of improvements that serve the development. And they do this on a one-time investment. Once the city accepts that infrastructure, they are accepting the responsibility of a lifetime investment requiring ongoing maintenance and repair. We have to remember that regardless of whether the population in our community grows or remains stagnant, the infrastructure in place ages nonetheless. And as a city continues to add streets, water, sewer, and drainage facilities to its expansive inventory, the demands continue to grow no matter what. So, what is the resource gap referenced in this slide? Well, it's the gap between the demands for maintenance and repair and our available resources. It's a point of attention that all communities must contend with. And as this illustrates, It's made more difficult with the variety of residents and competing interests to serve, often reliant on resources that just don't grow at the same pace. How do we bridge that resource gap? Well, at Verdunity, we suggest that the best way to begin is to have a common language that both city officials and residents can use in order to discuss common problems and build common solutions. It is the best interest of all parties, as well as future generations, to make fiscal sustainability a central theme in governance. So, bottom line, what are the options for closing this resource gap? Well, I can tell you it generally comes down to three choices, none of which are easy. First, cities can keep doing things the way they currently are, but charge more via higher taxes and fees in order to cover the costs. Second, they can opt to leave the tax rate where it is, but cut services to align with what the revenues actually are. Or third, they can take steps to proactively adjust the development pattern and infrastructure design within the community to enable an affordable balance. Now, we often encounter cities that are focused on building a tax base, and they use appraised property values as their standard of success. Unfortunately, this is the equivalent of a business owner who only looks at gross profits instead of profits after expenses to gauge how well they're doing. It's an incomplete picture at best. Property tax revenue per acre, that is the actual levy on the property on a per acre basis, is a valuable measure to a community who wants to understand and protect pockets of current fiscal sustainability while continuing to build upon them. It is the truest measure of how properties within a city are performing and contributing. And you might be surprised to learn where this occurs in various cities. So on this slide, I have two figures created from tax data for Dallas County, Texas. The figure on the left is simply a map showing the appraised values of every parcel in the county. The darker the color, the higher the value. Looking at this one picture out of context implies that the majority of property within Dallas County is actively generating revenue. But as I just mentioned, this is an incomplete picture at best. So let's look at the figure on the right. The figure on the right tells a different story that more accurately represents the dollars being generated. The northwest and north central parts of the county are those truly contributing the most profit. Let's take a look at another example. Here's one from Taylor, Texas. The colors on this map indicate the revenue per acre of parcels within their city limits. Those in blue are generating under $1,000 per acre, and the darker greens are on the highest end of that spectrum. It is typical to see parcels around the perimeter of cities who have annexed land that is not yet developed or developed intensively, showing low revenues. And that's exactly what we see when we look at Taylor. Now, let's see what the map looks like once we have the net revenue per acre factored in. See how the changes to red occur? These are areas that are netting less than $0 per acre net. The number of parcels on the high end of the spectrum has also dropped significantly when compared to the first map. The next step we often take is to figure in some semblance of costs. And we like to start with a conversation about street infrastructure costs. So let's factor those in as they exist today. See, the red continues to grow. Those are areas, again, that are very telling. There are far fewer parts of the city that are covering the cost of maintenance, which is critical. So you may find yourself wondering what your community's revenue per acre maps would look like. And on this slide, you'll see a revenue per acre analysis. Again, that's the first step in the series before costs are factored in. that the City of Overland Park has done based on 2020 appraisal data. The city has done some early exploratory analysis, and more will come as part of the anticipated comprehensive plan process. What surprises you about this graph? Do you find it surprising to see where the highest revenues are generated? And think about what the development patterns look like in those areas. More to come about that. So now let's talk about the bottom line of these mapping and analysis exercises. Well, in most cases, it's simply this. The style of development since World War II simply does not generate enough tax base to cover the costs required to maintain infrastructure and to serve residents at their level of expectation over time. Here we look at data in another light. This is from work we've done in Bastrop, Texas. And this particular graph shows a look at the return on investment, or ROI for short, for each of their zoning districts. A quick glance shows you that their top performers include their historic downtown area, some of their commercial zoning districts, and their mixed-use zoning districts. This is also something that can be replicated easily in cities like Overland Park to understand how your various zoning districts are performing at their current rates. And here we see data put together for the city of Brownsville, Texas. Now, while the average value of improvements grows with the size of the lot in almost every instance, the revenue per acre is actually highest on lots under 3/4 of an acre. How would development and zoning decisions be made differently if our overall goal was to keep the city financially healthy? It's far easier for city leaders to make decisions in this way when they have all of the facts and context as to the financial implications involved. Now let's take a look at the resource or funding gap in action. This slide shows a street segment in Taylor, Texas, where we're currently working on a comprehensive plan for their community. On this street segment, the total taxable value of the properties is $1.6 million. We hear that and we think that sounds great, right? But there's more to the story we have to take into account. Now, based on the average property value of $112,000 and their tax rate of 0.788, or 78 cents on the dollar, these properties will generate just over $13,000 a year in tax revenue. Even if 100% of that revenue was dedicated to this specific repair project, which would be exceedingly rare, it would take 65 years to pay off the investment. And with streets, that means roughly 3 times the life of that street. The fact is, property tax revenue tends to go towards many other funding needs first. And you can see by projecting this out citywide how the gap continues to grow rather quickly. Another specific example might be helpful to have an idea of how development patterns dictates this information. Here, also from Taylor, we have 2 different types of development patterns. On the left, you have your traditional Main Street with a mix of uses. This is very typical of downtowns in cities of all sizes around the nation. On the right, we have a suburban pad site, and these are the types of out parcels that we see around communities on very heavily traveled highways and roads. Now, in both instances, the properties are roughly 3/4 of an acre in size. But the Main Street example generates almost $10,000 more property tax revenue per acre on an annual basis. What's the difference? You take a look at the photographs, instances where there are differences to keep in mind will jump out at you. However, to sum it up, the resources in the first example, in this case, the land, is being maximized to reach its fullest potential as opposed to the second. Development standards and regulations have helped in creation of the places like the suburban pad site. However, it's important to understand how we can modify these types of requirements in order to help profitability levels within a city. Every city strives to be fiscally solvent, environmentally resilient, and inclusive, but the daily decisions and investments that are made rarely align with and lead to those desired outcomes. A city that can incrementally build on its revenue, population, and costs for services, such as in the graph on the right, the resilient growth model, is a stable and long-lasting model. Making short-term decisions without thinking about the long-term costs is an unsustainable model. And it's one that we see nationwide as cities struggle continuously to find adequate resources to serve their communities. So again, back to including this as part of a comprehensive planning strategy. Well, how can this happen? Well, keep in mind that the best comprehensive plans are actionable, dynamic, and they create accountability. If the city's committed, a plan can check all of those boxes. First, however, a city must know their numbers. That is, they need to quantify what their resource gap is and analyze how their development patterns may be exacerbating the issue. Then they can evaluate ways to support and drive resources to the fiscally productive patterns and the existing paid-for infrastructure that will pay dividends, while utilizing incremental development to re-energize and be better stewards of the existing built environment in the city's neighborhoods. The comprehensive planning process is also an ideal time to integrate existing plans and departments, to break down the silos that we show in the graphic here and create a team that can get the big things right. That's the best place to begin. Part of that process is linking the plan to the city's budget. Did you know that in most cities, the budgeting process doesn't take into consideration how investing in the right places and patterns can reap rewards for the community to benefit from? It's simply not part of the conversation. Another important component of an actionable and dynamic plan is an implementation strategy that works incrementally and involves the community. These are more likely to succeed. Every city has residents who care about the community and want to be involved, but they often don't know where to begin. By the city taking a leadership role in pooling and accounting for the existing resources, assessing the talent and skills within the community, and rallying the community members with the staff, those groups can accomplish much more. A dynamic and actionable plan also establishes guiding principles and understands that trade-offs are necessary. Residents can become frustrated with plans that are completed and that begin to gather dust and are completely left out of the daily business of running a city while disregarding the very real resource limitations. The best way to get a plan that is going to be utilized and is within reach of your community is to have open conversations, transparency, and communication around what the possible trade-offs might be, managing everyone's expectations, and rallying a sense of we're all in this together. The type of community where everyone's preferences can always be met, and for that community to have the adequate resources for growing demand, well, it simply doesn't exist. So in conclusion, a desire to be fiscally resilient, it isn't enough. It requires an honest accounting of where you are, the bravery to have these transparent, inclusive community conversations, and the commitment of residents along with the city organization to make those efforts successful. If you have any questions, here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to continue the conversation with you and answer any questions. Thank you for your time. Have a great day and best of luck with the continuing plans for the City of Overland Park. Thank you.
We want to hear from you. For more information about this speaker series and to keep up with the latest, visit our website, opkansas.org/compplan. Thank you.